Ayanna Williams sat on a wooden bench near the playground in Lincoln Park, Madison, Wisconsin. She pulled up the sleeves of her sweater, shivering in the gentle breeze that carried the scent of autumn. Her eyes wandered between the children laughing on the swings, the fallen leaves on the grass, creating a strangely peaceful scene. Her mother had said she would be there in 10 minutes, but Ayanna didn't care much about the time. She enjoyed the fresh air and the quiet moments reserved for herself. A little further across the park, Karen Whitfield adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. Her eyes narrowed when she caught sight of Ayanna. She had seen the girl enter the park alone about 20 minutes ago, and since then, Karen's mind had been plagued by doubts. A strange feeling crept into her thoughts, fueled by unconscious assumptions. She pursed her lips, not stopping to wonder why she felt this way. She muttered something and stepped forward, pulling out her phone. Her eyes scanned the area, as if searching for unseen confirmation from those around her. Karen's fingers moved decisively across the screen before she pressed the phone to her ear. Her voice was sharp and firm, shattering the silence of the park. "Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious person in Lincoln Park," she told the dispatcher. "It's a young woman, sitting alone for quite a while. I just thought someone should check." Ayanna looked up at the sound of Karen's voice in the air. Their eyes met for a moment. A tightness gripped Ayanna's chest, but she managed a polite smile. A small, fragile smile, hoping to ease the invisible tension. But Karen didn't respond. She turned away, continuing the call with a determined gesture, as if she had done her duty. Time passed slowly. Ayanna tried to focus on the familiar sounds around her, the sound of cars passing by on a nearby road, the laughter of a family picnicking, the crunch of dry leaves under the feet of a jogger. These sounds, which had always been comforting, were now a faint background beneath the heaviness of Karen's gaze that never left her. A distant siren shattered the peaceful atmosphere. Ayanna's body tensed involuntarily. She turned toward the park entrance, her heart sinking as she saw 2 police cruisers pull up. The officers stepped out, walking slowly but purposefully, scanning the area. When Karen waved them off, a pang of bitterness washed over Ayanna. She knew. And she knew what she would face next. Ayanna felt her heart pound as the familiar voice rang out. "She was there," Karen said, pointing at her. Ayanna's stomach twisted, a sense of anxiety rising. What had she done? She glanced around, as if hoping for some way out, but everything was a blur. She shifted on the bench, her body stiff, her heart filled with hesitation. Should she stay put or leave? She felt her breathing quicken, her palms sweating. But before she could decide, the officers approached. Their expressions were unreadable, but the seriousness in their eyes was impossible to ignore. "Excuse me." One of them spoke, his voice even but firm. "Can we talk to you?" Ayanna tried to swallow, but her throat tightened. Her voice trembled as she replied, I was just waiting for my mother. I didn't do anything wrong." The officer glanced briefly at Karen, who stood with her arms crossed, her expression filled with triumph and affirmation. Ayanna's breathing grew heavier as she realized this wasn't about anything she had done. It was about who Karen thought she was. That truth hurt more than any accusation. The officers stood near her, their shadows stretching in the late afternoon sun. One pulled out a notebook, carefully flipping through the pages, while the other adjusted his utility belt, his gaze sweeping the area before settling on Ayanna's face. "What is your name, young lady?" the tall officer asked. His voice was not threatening, but it carried a weight that sent a chill down Ayanna's spine. She swallowed, trying to keep her composure. "Ayanna," she said softly, her hands clasped in her lap to keep them from shaking. "And what are you doing here?" His tone was neutral, but there was a sharp edge, as if her answer might never be enough. Ayanna took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "I'm waiting for my mother. She's on her way to pick me up." From behind them, Karen Whitfield spoke again, cutting her off once more. "She's sitting here again." Karen's voice was thick with malice. For at least half an hour. And she's been staring at the playground. I don't know what she's up to, but I think, better be careful. Ayanna turned sharply toward Karen, her jaw tightening. I'm not looking at the playground. I'm just sitting here, minding my own business. The shorter officer glanced at Karen, then turned back to Ayanna. Do you have any identification? Ayanna frowned, confused. She was only 14. I don't have my ID with me, she stammered. The taller officer sighed, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, his expression impatient. Do you have a phone? Can you call someone? Ayanna hesitated, then slowly pulled out her phone. Her hands shook as she dialed. The line rang twice before a familiar, deep voice came through the speaker. Hello, it's Latasha. At that moment, Ayanna felt a rush of warmth flood through her chest. Mom. Her voice cracked, almost choking. There are some police officers here, they're asking me a lot of questions. Can you come right now? A tense silence fell. Then a quick, determined breath. Mom's on her way. Don't move. Don't let them take you anywhere. The call ended. Ayanna clutched the phone in her hand, feeling the cold seeping into her fingers. My mother is coming, she said, her voice trembling but hopeful. The two officers exchanged glances. The taller one took a step back, speaking softly into the radio mounted on his shoulder. His eyes flickered to Karen Whitfield, who had her arms crossed, a smug look on her face. I mean, you can't be too careful these days, Karen muttered, as if reminding herself. You never know. Anger boiled inside Ayanna. She clenched her hands at her sides, her nails digging into her palms as her frustration built, weighing down on her fear. The minutes of waiting stretched painfully long. Every sound around her seemed amplified, birds chirping, leaves rustling, the murmurs of passers-by taking in the scene. And then, the roar of an engine cut through the tense atmosphere. A sleek black SUV stopped right in front of the police cruiser. The car door opened, and Latasha Johnson stepped out. She wasn't just Ayanna's mother. She was the mayor of Madison, Wisconsin. Latasha's face was stern, and each step echoed with authority on the sidewalk. Her high heels clicked loudly on the cement, each step exuding absolute control. Silence fell over the crowd as they took in her presence. Ayanna quickly stood, her chest tight with tension but also with relief. Her mother had arrived. But Latasha's eyes weren't on her daughter. She was focused on the two police officers. And on Karen Whitfield. Her voice rang out, sharp as a honed knife, what's going on here? Latasha took a deep breath, keeping her voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the tense atmosphere. Her gaze moved from the taller officer to Karen, each movement calculated, as if her every word was a blade cutting through the fog of favoritism. Why are you asking me? She tilted her head, her tone unwavering. The officer's daughter straightened, clearing her throat. Ma'am, we received a call about a suspicious individual in the park. We just. Latasha raised her hand, stopping him mid-sentence, her eyes flashing with suspicion. Suspicious? What exactly makes her a suspect? Sitting on a bench in a public park. Karen stepped forward, her confidence wavering under Latasha's sharp scrutiny. I didn't mean to hurt her. She began, her voice a little defensive. I just didn't recognize her and she was sitting there for a while. I thought it was a little strange. Latasha's eyebrows rose, her gaze turning cold. You saw a black teenager sitting alone in the park and decided she was a threat. Do you realize how dangerous that is? Your baseless assumptions could ruin someone's life. Karen's face flushed, her gaze sliding to the ground, muttering something incoherent. Latasha turned back to the officers, her voice low but sharp. And you? When you arrived, did you assess the situation objectively? Or did you immediately validate this woman's baseless fears? Did any of you stop to wonder if this was racial profiling? The taller officer opened his mouth to reply but seemed caught in his own words. His partner stepped forward, trying to calm the situation. "Ma'am, we're just following protocol. We're here to keep everyone safe." Latasha's eyes narrowed, her smile devoid of humor. "Safety? My daughter poses no threat to anyone. But thanks to this woman's prejudice and your rash response, she now feels unsafe in a space she has every right to be in." She stepped closer to Ayana, placing a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Ayana, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was shaky but firm. "I did nothing wrong. I was just waiting for you." Latasha's jaw clenched. She stared at the people before her, letting them feel the weight of injustice that filled the air. And then, she exhaled, taking her daughter's hand. "Let's go, Ayana." Looking at Karen one last time, Latasha felt a lingering anger, but above all, a deep disappointment. "You owe me, my daughter, an apology." Her voice was low, but its weight froze the air around her. Karen stood there, her expression a mixture of shame and urgency. She had said her words, sharp and heavy, and now she was facing the consequences. Hesitation was written all over her face. Karen's lips moved, opening and closing, as if searching for an excuse. But under Latasha's unwavering gaze and the growing murmur of the crowd, there was no way back. Finally, in a weak voice, she muttered, I'm sorry. But it wasn't enough. You need to think long and hard about why you consider my daughter a threat." Latasha's voice was cold, but each word cut like a knife. "This isn't just about today. This is about the ingrained prejudices that lead us to make dangerous judgments. And it was those that could have cost my daughter her life." The crowd fell silent. Latasha's words were directed not just at Karen, but at everyone standing there. The stark truth of it made no one dare to argue. The officers took a step back, as if realizing the gravity of the situation. "Let this be your wake-up call." Latasha's gaze swept over Karen and the officers, determined. "We need to do better. All of us." She turned to Ayana, her voice softer, "Come on, honey." Ayana followed her mother toward the SUV, filled with conflicting emotions. Relief. Pride. But also a simmering disappointment. She knew her mother had just done what few people would dare, stand up for her, for justice. But she also knew that the wounds of discrimination could not be easily erased. The Lincoln Park incident was more than a fleeting moment. It did not end that afternoon. The next day, the whole town was talking about it. Video from bystanders spread like wildfire on social media. Images of Mayor Latasha Johnson confronting police and Karen Whitfield dominated the headlines. The hashtags #Lincoln Park Incident and #Systemic Prejudice trended for days. At City Hall, reporters crowded the steps, shouting questions as Latasha entered the building. Inside her office, the phones rang non-stop. Supporters praised her decisiveness, while critics questioned her motives, even accused her of overreacting. But Latasha was not shaken. She remained calm, steadfast. And she knew, this fight was not over. As she stepped up to the podium in the press room, she took a deep breath. Flashbulbs flashed, hundreds of eyes focused on her. But Latasha was not afraid. She was prepared to speak, not just to defend her daughter, but to defend justice, for all those who have been wronged. Because this was not just an incident. This was a turning point. The community leaders and Ayana stood silently beside her. The room was filled with tension, thoughtful glances, held breaths as if waiting for something momentous. Latasha took a deep breath, her voice starting to be even but full of emotion. "My daughter, Ayana, was just sitting in the park, enjoying a peaceful afternoon, and she became the target of suspicion. Just because someone decided she didn't belong there." She paused, letting her words sink in with each person present. "This is not an isolated incident. This is part of a larger pattern that too many of us face every day. But yesterday, it happened to my daughter. And I refuse to let that be forgotten. The room became so quiet that you could hear your heartbeat. The tension was overwhelming. Ayanna shifted slightly, feeling the eyes on her. Latasha continued, her voice growing stronger. We cannot continue to ignore the damage these biases cause. Not just to individuals, but to the fabric of our communities. We cannot allow fear and invisible discrimination to stifle the cohesion and trust of our society. That is why today, I am announcing comprehensive anti-bias training for all city employees, including our police force. A murmur rose from the crowd. Some applauded enthusiastically, while others whispered to each other. A reporter raised her hand, her eyes filled with doubt. Mayor Johnson, do you really believe this training will prevent future incidents like this? Latasha looked the reporter straight in the eye, unblinking. Education alone cannot undo centuries of systemic inequality. But it is a start. The most important thing is that we commit to doing this every day, not just when an incident like this makes a headline. Outside the conference room, the story spread like wildfire on social media. Karen Whitfield's name was echoed in hundreds of posts, thousands of comments. Neighbors, people who knew her, confronted her, asking, "Why would you call the police on a little girl sitting in the park?" Karen issued a public apology, insisting that she had meant no harm. But her words rang hollow to many. They didn't want an apology, they wanted change, real change, meaningful change. And for Latasha, for Ayanna, and for their entire community, yesterday would be more than a sad memory. It will be a milestone. A turning point. A new beginning. At Lincoln High School, Ayanna returned to her classroom with a mixture of nervousness and determination. She felt her heart beat faster as she walked through the door, her classmates' eyes on her. She had not expected the incident to make her the center of conversation. The whispers, the curious looks, and the angst made her feel more out of place than ever. Her history teacher, Mr. Daniels, was also unnerved. He hesitated before speaking, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. After a long silence, he finally spoke, his voice warm but measured. "Ayanna, if you're comfortable, I think it's important for us all to learn from your experience. Is there anything you'd like to share?" The class fell silent. Ayanna could feel the tension in the air. She hesitated, glancing around the room, where familiar and unfamiliar faces were watching her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. "I didn't ask for this to happen." Her voice was soft but firm. "But it happened. And it made me realize something: many people like me have to constantly prove that they belong somewhere. It's not fair." Her words hung in the air, touching the minds and hearts of those around her. Some classmates bowed their heads in thought, others nodded. It was the first time Ayanna felt the real weight of her voice. She had always been a quiet person, but this time, she no longer wanted to be silent. As the weeks passed, the effects of the Lincoln Park incident began to reverberate throughout Madison. Mayor Latasha Johnson quickly launched an anti-bias training initiative, starting with city employees and law enforcement. The program included workshops on unconscious bias, personal assessments, and community forums where citizens could openly share their experiences. The first forum, held at the Madison Public Library, drew a diverse crowd. Ayanna attended with her mother. They sat quietly listening as others shared their stories. An older man told of being followed in stores his entire life. A young woman described how she had been overlooked at work, despite her qualifications and abilities. The stories were different, but they all shared a common thread: pain and a desire for justice. When Ayanna's turn came, she hesitated. The memories of that day were still fresh in her mind, but she knew her voice was important. Looking out at the room, where hopeful eyes were waiting, she took a deep breath and began to speak. This time, she no longer felt alone. She speaks not only for herself, but for all those who have felt like her, those who have waited so long to be heard. Shaking slightly, I didn't think something like this could happen to me. My voice shook as I began, my hands clasped together to keep the excitement from overwhelming me. I was just sitting in the park, waiting for my mom, but in just a brief moment, the feeling of safety was gone, replaced by a feeling of alienation, like I didn't belong here anymore. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It doesn't matter who my mom is, or where I'm from, no one deserves to feel like this. No one deserves to experience fear and hurt just because they are who they are. I paused, my eyes scanning the room, where hundreds of pairs of eyes were watching me. I hope that by sharing my story, we can start to change that. Not just for me, but for everyone. There was a moment of silence before the room erupted in thunderous applause. I breathed a sigh of relief as I sat down, my cheeks still burning but my heart feeling lighter. Ayanna, I told myself, you did it. Meanwhile, Karen Whitfield stood quietly in the background, away from the public eye. Her apology was not enough to quell the increasingly harsh criticism. But, quietly, she began to change. She attended forums, not speaking, simply listening. No one knew what she thought, but her presence was noted. Perhaps it was the beginning of her own self-examination. Changes began to creep into the community. Police became more involved in local events, appearing for the first time out of uniform, mingling with ordinary people. Schools changed, too, incorporating lessons about bias into their curriculum, helping students recognize and confront bias in their everyday lives. At Lincoln High School, Ayanna unexpectedly became a leader. Her friends encouraged her to join the school's debate team, where she discovered her talent for public speaking and her ability to challenge stereotypes. Her first topic: the impact of racial bias in everyday life. After a practice debate, Ayanna sat in the living room with her mother, Latasha. Her mother looked at her daughter, her eyes sparkling with pride. You know what? I always knew you had a strong voice. I just didn't expect the world to hear it so soon. Ayanna smiled, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. I just want things to be better, for everyone. Her voice trailed off, but her determination remained. Latasha wrapped her arms around her daughter, pulling her close. And then, things will be better. Because there are people like you in this world. In the month since the mural was completed next to the Lincoln Community Center, it has become a bright spot in the neighborhood. The vibrant scene of unity, where children of all races play together, continues to inspire those who pass by. The symbols of hope and justice still shine brightly in the sunlight, reminding everyone of the power of community and perseverance. Ayanna often stands at a distance, quietly observing people's reactions to the mural. She sees the smiles on the faces of the children, hears the admiring whispers from the elders, and feels the quiet pride in her mother's heart. But deep inside her, the sense of responsibility remains, not as a burden, but as a fire that urges her to continue. One late afternoon, as the sunset casts a warm golden glow over the mural, a young boy tugs on Ayanna's hand and points to the girl in the mural, his eyes bright with curiosity. Are you that girl? The simple question made Ayanna's heart flutter. She smiled down at him, nodding slightly. What do you think she's thinking about? The boy thought for a moment, then replied, she's thinking about a better tomorrow. Those words were an affirmation that the mural was more than just a work of art, it was a promise. It represented a future that everyone, regardless of color or background, could build together. And Ayanna understood that her role was not over, it was just beginning. As the Lincoln community changed, conversations about social justice were no longer forgotten. Child support programs, diversity workshops, and volunteer projects proliferated. The mural became a symbol of awakening, and Ayanna, with a quiet but strong determination, continued to be a part of that journey. Every time she passed the painting, she would place her hand on her own image, feeling the warmth of unfulfilled dreams. And she knew that, whatever the road ahead, she was not alone. Her community was ready to move forward, and so was she.